محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. Welcome back to the study of Hadith Jibreel. Hadith Jibreel is one of the major hadith of Islam in which the Prophet ﷺ was visited by a stranger to the people of Medina who was at the time, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned towards the end of the Hadith Jibreel. He came in the form of a human being and he asked the Prophet ﷺ a few questions about Al-Islam, about Al-Iman, about Al-Ihsan. We've been discussing this hadith for the past few weeks. Today we have part 2 on the subject of zakah. In the hadith, Jibreel asked the Prophet ﷺ, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ, tell me more about Islam. What is Islam is all about? And the Prophet ﷺ expanded Islam by giving him the 5 pillars of Islam. Shahadat an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah, that you bear witness there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That you perform the salah, and you give the zakah. Giving the zakah was the second thing that was mentioned with salah. We covered that last week. We talked about the history of zakah, the importance of zakah, why it was associated with salah. So we talked about that in details. And tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we are into some of the technicalities of the zakah, meaning some of the items that needs to be considered zakah payable items, and what is the amount of zakah that you need to pay. So we begin with this, inshallah ta'ala. Some of the major items. We're not going to be able, obviously, to cover everything about zakah in one session. But we're going to just speak about major things that people deal with mostly and on daily basis, probably on annual basis. So the 4 major items that people support, or what we consider them zakah payable items. Number 1, personal wealth. Personal wealth. And personal wealth comes in different categories. We're going to explain them, inshallah, in this session, binillah azza wa jal. Number 2, livestock. We talk about livestock, we talk about 3 types of animals. We're talking about sheep and the category of sheep, such as goats and so forth. Cows and the category of cows, again, such as bulls or even any other items that are in the same range. And then there's also camels. These are the 3 types of animals that the people responsible or needs to give zakah of. What kind of zakah, how do you calculate that? We're going to discuss this, inshallah ta'ala. Then there's agriculture, which means crops in particular. So what is need to be given? And also there are treasures. Treasures such as people, let's say they dig, for example, to build their house. And lo and behold, they find gold, for example. What do you do with this gold? How do I deal with it? Or if they find some precious metal, for example, that has certain values in the market. Or even like nowadays, for instance, oil. That is also considered treasure. And it's called in the Arabic language, ar-rikaz. We're not going to talk about this tonight. Probably maybe we'll talk about some other, inshallah, sessions, bidnillahi azza wa jal. But the first and most important thing is the personal wealth. Because that's what most people ask about. This is what we're going to give more details on, inshallah ta'ala. What people ask the most is their personal properties and personal wealth. When we say personal wealth, it's what you have full possession of. The money, the wealth that you own, and you have full possession of. And when you talk about possession, which is why actually one of the main reasons why you give zakah, because since you have the freedom of having possession and ownership of these items, then that gives you the liberty of giving or taking, of growing or keeping in your hand, and so forth. And in order to encourage people not to store this wealth in their hands as treasure, Sharia imposed that zakah on them to help the people, or at least to force the people, as a matter of fact, and make it like an incentive to put that money into the market so that it doesn't get consumed by paying zakah regularly. So it's more like stimulating the market. People shouldn't be keeping that wealth in their hand. And when we talk about zakah, we mentioned that last time, but here just to give it quickly, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we always use gold and silver as the base in which we calculate the zakah. Because back in the days, gold and silver used to be the price and the value of commodities. When you buy things, you buy them with gold or silver. Dinar was the gold, and dirham was the silver. Today, people replace gold and silver with other forms of values of commodities. In this case, we have the dollar bills, which means the cash money that people they use, and even we have the electronic form of payments, such as bitcoins. So is that considered mal? Is that considered wealth that is in Sharia considerable, of course, to pay zakah of, and so on? We shall discuss that, inshallah wa ta'ala. Just to summarize what we discussed last time about the amount of zakah or the amount of nisab that needs to be given. In order for zakah to become wajib, obligatory upon a person to give, there are 2 things needs to be maintained. One is the prerequisite, which is basically that the wealth needs to reach certain amount. That amount is like a threshold, the minimum. The minimum of that amount, if you own it in your hand, then you start calculating towards the zakah. That amount, we call it nisab. So if your wealth that you own and you possess, gold, silver, and nowadays what actually comes in the place of gold and silver, which is your cash money, this money right now, if you have what we consider nisab, the value of 20 grams of gold or 200 dirhams of silver, which is in modern day 85 grams of pure gold, or 2.9 now, which means 3 actually ounces of gold. In this case, you calculate that as nisab. And last week actually value, I checked last week value, it was $41.52 per 1 gram of gold, which means that the nisab was 3,529.2. If anyone owned that much money last week, then they need to calculate for the year to start giving the zakah for the next year. However, I checked today's value of the gold, it actually went down a little bit. So today's value was actually at 41.26. Before I came, I checked it, it was 41.26, which means if you say 41.26 times 85, will be a little bit less than 3,529. It will be a few dollars less. But the point is, in order for us to calculate our zakah, I need to know how much money I have in my bank account, how much money do I have cash in my pocket, how much money do I have, stored with my spouse, with my brothers, with my parents. The money that I own, all of that should be all get together, actually calculate together, sum total. And if that amount of money that I have is over the value of $3,500, let's say round it up to $3,500, for example, or down to $3,500 to make it easy. If you own $3,500, then you're considered rich enough to start calculating to pay zakah. So the nisab, the threshold of your wealth and your money, we talk about the cash money right now that you have, supposed to be actually at $3,500. If you have $3,500 and up, then you are now a person who's considered responsible to calculate for zakah. But it's not wajib yet. It's not obligatory yet, because there are other conditions that needs to be maintained and observed in order to make the zakah obligatory upon you. What are the conditions for zakah to be actually now wajib and fard upon you? So the condition, number one, that you have the full ownership of this excess wealth. What does that mean? If I have $5,000, that is my money right now. So in this case, this money, it's in my hand, or at least I have access to it, easily I have access to it, then I have the full ownership of this money. But if this money, I say, let's say I have 5,000, but in reality, I don't have access to it. Why? Because some of it, maybe I lost it. I don't even know. I remember where I put it. Some of that money, maybe I buried it somewhere and just forgot to complete the map where it was, or anything of that nature. Like I don't have full possession of it. You don't calculate that. It's gone. But if you have access to it and you know what it is, then again, that would be considered actually a money or wealth that you have full ownership of. When we say excess wealth, because if you own $3,500, alhamdulillah, you save on annual basis $3,500 and up, that means you're wealthy enough because you can still save $3,500. But if you don't have enough money and your money is always below $3,500, then you don't have the nisab, so you're considered part of the recipient, the category of recipients of zakah. Number two, the second condition for that wealth that you have, it needs to be debt-free. What do you mean debt-free? Let's say I have $10,000 cash in my account. $10,000 at the end of the year, I have $10,000. But then when I calculate of this $10,000, I owe this brother $1,000. I owe my sister $2,000. I owe for the car payment, for example, $300. For the house payment, I owe $1,000. So I keep calculating that on that month when I need to pay the zakah. When I calculate everything, I realize I have about $7,000 or let's say $8,000 debts that are immediately, I need to pay them off completely. When you calculate, so you have 10,000 cash, but I have 8,000 debt that is immediately due that I need to pay basically, then you deduct that out of the 10,000. So you say 10,000 minus 8,000 equals 2,000. So you realize right now you have, even though you have $10,000 cash in your hand, but how much of the 10,000 is considered yours? Only 2,000. So what is 2,000? If you look back, it's less than the amount of nisab. It's less than the amount of nisab. Therefore, you don't pay zakah. Instead, you need to pay off these debts immediately. Some people might say, okay, so in this case, I will never pay zakah at all. And we say, why? Well, you know, I have my house, my mortgage. It cost me a lot of money. So I still owe the bank about $250,000. Yes, alhamdulillah, I have $50,000 cash in my account, but you know, I still owe $250,000 for the house, for example, and $10,000 for the car, and maybe $7,000 for the furniture, and I owe also $25,000 for my kids, for example, student loans, and this and that. You calculate all of this, the person has $500,000 debt, and he has $50,000 cash in his bank account. Does this person pay zakah? If you look at it from that perspective, you will see he would never pay zakah. That means no one will ever pay zakah. So how do we calculate this? We calculate the debt based on what is considered due right now. Which means, if you plan to give the $50,000 all at once towards all these debts, then yeah, you don't pay zakah. But if you're only going to be paying the monthly payment for these debts, then you only calculate the debt for that particular month when the zakah becomes due. Is that clear, Jama'ah? So in this case, I have $50,000 in my bank account, and I would like to calculate the monthly payments for everything I owe, even though I have a lot of money as debts. When you calculate all of that, you realize you have, let's say, 15,000, for example. You take that out of the 50,000, then you're left with 35,000. So you pay zakah on the 35,000. You only pay zakah on the 35,000 because you're paying out 15,000. But let's say my son has $20,000, let's say student loan. So I'm going to take out of the 50,000 an extra 20,000 and throw it on that just to pay it off completely. So I'll take from the 35,000 another 20,000 because I'm paying it this month. So now I'm left with how much? 15,000. So you pay zakah on the 15,000 only if you plan to give all that money out. So when we say to be debt-free, means for that particular month, if you plan to give that money towards the debts. But if you don't plan, because again you have a long-term debt such as the house payments and the car payments and furniture payments and whatever, in this case you only just deduct all the debts that you have for this month. Do I include also my utility bills as part of the debt? The answer is yes. If you have utility bills, also you calculate that. So for example, you have the house payment, then you have the electricity, gas, water, whatever that you're going to be paying for that month, you deduct all of this for that month. Whatever is left in your account, if it's still above the nisab amount, then you pay the zakah. So the third condition for the zakah, to become eligible to pay the zakah, is the passage of 1 year, or what we call it al-hawl. 1 full year need to pass around while you still have a nisab and above. While you still have a nisab and above. What does that mean? Let's say somebody start a new job today. When you check their bank account, they barely had $500. Do they have nisab? They don't have nisab. So do they need to pay zakah or calculate for the zakah? They don't. 2 months later, let's say in January, for example, mashallah, throughout the 2 or 3 months that you've been working so far, they were able to save in their bank account enough money. So when they checked their bank account on, let's say, January that month, they found that they have, alhamdulillah, $4,000 extra. What does that mean? They paid all their bills. They paid all their bills, all the debts that they need to cover for that particular month, and they find out, alhamdulillah, moving to the next month right now, the next, let's say, paycheck, they have 4,000 extra money in their account. Is that 4,000 above the nisab or below the nisab? Above the nisab. So from that month, from January, the person needs to start calculating for the hawl, which means the 1 year. When we say January, just to make it easy for us, but actually you calculate based on the lunar calendar. Why is that? Because there is 11 days difference. The lunar calendar runs 11 days earlier. So therefore, you need to calculate, let's say it's going to be Safar, for example, the month of Safar, or the month, let's say, of the Hijjah, if it was the end of the year, or any other month. So you calculate from that month, and you start kind of waiting for the next year to come by. Now, obviously, from January until next January, for example, or from Muharram until next Muharram, there's a full year. People, they owe money, and they earn money. You owe and you earn. So you keep earning and earning. However, if your bank account and your cash money that you have in your hand fluctuated, you're fine as long as it's still above the nisab, which means my 4,000, they jumped up to 7,000, and then jumped up to 12,000, and then jumped much to 20,000, and then somehow it went down to 15,000, 12,000, and then went up to 13,000, and then back to 10,000. So it kept fluctuating throughout the year between payments and earning, or maybe investing, and so on. All of that. So my money kept fluctuating until the end of the year, which means the following year, January of the next year, or Muharram or Safar of the next year, whatever actually the month that you chose for the zakah, if your money is still above the amount of nisab, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Let's say, alhamdulillah, at the end of the year, I realized I have $100,000. In one single year, mashallah, I was able to save 100,000. You paid everything off that you need to pay off for that month, and now you're left with 100,000. So in this case, do I pay zakah? Of course, it's way above the nisab. So this is the meaning of calculating this. Again, you need to have full ownership of that excess wealth that you have in your hand. Number two, to be debt-free. And we mentioned how to calculate the debt. So you don't go and calculate all the debts that you own long-term unless you plan to pay it off that month. If you plan to pay it off that month, then eventually you take it out of the money. And the third one is to have the full hawl, which means the full year, to go around while you're still on the money above the nisab. Even if fluctuated above the nisab, it's okay. Question: what if my money throughout the year, let's say from January all the way until May, alhamdulillah, the money was fluctuating above the nisab. We went from 4 to 7 to 10 to 6 above, and then it kept going on. But then in June, all of a sudden, my money went below the nisab. Let's say I had to travel overseas. So I bought tickets, I bought gifts, I bought whatever, and all that stuff and so on. And subhanAllah, suddenly I look at my bank account after I paid off all that stuff. Oops, I'm at 3,000. You look at 3,000, it's below 3,500, which is the minimum nisab. So once it goes below the nisab, the hawl is broken. The hawl, which means the full year, is broken. So what you calculate from January until June right now, khalas, that's not void. You don't count that anymore. So what do? I wait again until my money goes above 3,500. So I go to travel overseas, and then while I'm there, I go to my bank account and I pull another 1,000. So by the time I came back from my trip, how much do I have in my account? 2,000. The end of June, let's say July, for example, I have 2,000. Still, it is below the nisab. Alhamdulillah, August came, September, then came, October. My money went above 3,500. So once it goes above 3,500, you start counting the hawl from that month. Let's say I became at 4,000, mashallah, in November. So I start saying from November, let's assume it was at the time it was Rabi'ul Awwal, for example. So from Rabi'ul Awwal, I start counting to the next Rabi'ul Awwal next year, a full year. As long as the fluctuation is still above the nisab, above the 3,500, we're good. If the fluctuation went below the nisab, the hawl is broken. Now some ulama, just to give you a kind of perspective here, some ulama, they say if the fluctuation happened within the hawl, but towards the end you still came back above the nisab, you're fine, you still pay zakah. Some ulama, they say, if the hawl was broken within 1 year, and then you recovered during the same year, you still continue with 1 year. That's an opinion. I follow the opinion that if the hawl went below or the nisab went below the amount came below the nisab, the hawl is broken, you stop calculating, you wait until you get the nisab again, and you start calculating from there, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Okay, so if these are the conditions, so how much zakah should I pay? You pay 2.5%, 2.5%, or as we call in Arabic language, ربع العشر. ربع العشر, you pay that amount actually, and that amount is supposed to be from the excess wealth. What does that mean? Like we said, after full year, whatever is left in your possession, this is considered an excess wealth. Because alhamdulillah, throughout the year, I paid all my bills and everything, so I was sustaining my life. And now that money that I have in my bank account is just an excess wealth. Therefore, you pay 2.5%. Okay, do I include the nisab with that? Of course you do. So you're not going to go, I say I have 100,000. You're not going to say, okay, 100,000 minus the nisab. No, no, no. The entire amount. Okay, when I say entire amount, do I have to have, the portions of the amount, of that amount for a full year, each one of them? Or how is that? Like, for example, after I calculate the nisab, let's say in January, in February, mashallah, in February, I got $50,000. And then from February all the way until the next January, I didn't gain anything. So we agree that we pay 2.5% on that amount. But let's say I got the nisab on January. February came, nothing happened. March, April, June, all the way until November that same year. In November, mashallah, I got $70,000. And then came December, then came January. Now the zakah needs to be paid. Do I pay the zakah on the nisab only that I had in my hand for a full year? Or do I pay the zakah on the entire amount of cash that I had throughout the year, including the $70,000, which I only owned for 2 months? What do I do in this case? What do you guys think? The entire amount, altogether. Yeah, but I had only this for 2 months. Doesn't matter. It was within the 1 year that you were, alhamdulillah, considered above the nisab, wealthy enough. Whatever excess money comes within 1 year, it all summed up together. This all is going to come together. So how much do you pay? 2.5% of all that amount, and you get it out. How do we calculate this? Just to say how much money you pay off the nisab based on the calculation of the last week, which is $3,529.2. You divide that over 40, which is the one basically ربع العشر, then you pay only $88.23 zakah out of, let's round it up, for example, to 3,500. So almost you could say, every 3,500, just to be on the safe side, every 3,500, for example, let's say you pay $100. Just to be for rounding it up easily. For every 3,500, you pay $100. If you have $7,000, how much you pay? $200, right? And you start calculating like that just to make it easy to understand. However, obviously, towards the end of the year, you calculate how much money you own, how much money you have, and then you just take 2.5% out of that, inshallah ta'ala, and that will become the amount of zakah. So if someone has $100,000, what's the amount of zakah that they need to pay, Jama'ah? 2,500. Out of the 100,000, you only owe $2,500 zakah. That's it. Is that clear? So if you have 1 million, how much you pay? 25,000. $25,000. You might say, 25,000 zakah. Allah al-musta'an. Ya Jama'ah, you have 1 million. What is 25,000 with 1 million? Again, in proportion, it goes back the same thing. It's just 2.5%. When you say that $100 I pay, for example, of 10,000, I only pay, let's say, what do you call it, $25, or basically $250, that's nothing, right? It's the same thing. So the proportion is the exact same amount. Yes? Mm-hmm. Coming next, inshallah. It's coming next. So did you understand the calculation of zakah right now? I want to just make this introduction to understand the value of personal wealth, how to calculate that, basically what are the conditions, and now we can talk about the different categories of personal wealth, if I should pay zakah of this or not. Now, any question about this part? Yes? Yes. Mm-hmm. We're coming to discuss that as a personal debt, inshallah. So let's talk about this, inshallah. If you have any question, you can ask that ibn Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay. What other form of personal properties or personal wealth that I have that I should calculate within my zakah? Number one, let's talk about personal properties. Your car, your personal car. Do you pay zakah on this? Ya Jama'ah, your zakah. But you have Bentley, mashallah. Ya akhi, you have Bentley. Does it matter? Okay, you have two Bentleys. Doesn't matter. Do you pay zakah of this? Because each one of them is going to, mashallah, it's a lot of money, man. When you talk about $100,000, for example, car, if not even more, right? So you talk about maybe $250,000, if not $500,000, just standing there on the pavement, or basically in front of the driveway in front of your house. Do you pay zakah on this? The answer is no. Really? Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, right? Let me go and buy a Bentley then. Okay. What about your car, your house? Do you pay zakah on your house? Ya Jama'ah, do you pay zakah on your house? But your house is a mansion, mashallah. It's a $1 million house, Tabarak ar-Rahman. You said, alhamdulillah, the city takes the taxes anyway. No, you don't pay zakah on your house. So any personal property, anything that you own personally, you don't have to pay zakah off. The Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, لَيْسَ عَلَى الرَّجُلِ فِي فَرَسِهِ وَلَا فِي عَبْدِهِ صَدَقَةً. Means you don't owe sadaqah, you don't owe zakah on anything that you personally own. He mentioned in two examples, the Prophet ﷺ, the horse, and the time they had the slavery back then. So the Prophet ﷺ said, there's no zakah on personal property. Okay, what about your clothes? Let's say you have, mashallah, fancy suits there in your closet, tabarakallah, and each one of them would cost $1,000. You calculate the number of suits you have the worth of $15,000 suits. Do you pay zakah on this? If you put it on Amazon, you're going to get money out of it. So do you pay zakah on this? Still, it's your personal property. You don't pay zakah on that. Is that clear, Jama'ah? That's different. This will fall under the business assets in this case. But as long as it's your personal property, you don't pay zakah. Okay, I have 3 cars. I have 3 cars. I have a truck when I go on basically, transfer things. I have a personal car for, kind of business dealing and so on. And I have a luxury car. Do I pay zakah on any of these cars? What about the luxury car? Ya Jama'ah, luxury car. I just drive it to show off, that's all. Do I pay zakah on this? The answer is no. There is no zakah on any of these personal items. These are personally yours. You don't pay zakah on these things. So what about then, what if I have a land that I purchased 3-4 years ago, for example, and I left it in so-called home country for many people that think they consider some home country to them. And that land was left there because one day, inshallah, that I'm going to go and build a fancy, house there for vacation and so on. Now this house, this land is mine. Do you pay zakah on that land? The answer is no. You don't pay zakah on that land because this is now personal property. However, if you're keeping that land as a commodity until the prices go up, that's different. It's not like you bought it because it's cheap, because I'll keep it in my hand because I know 2-3 years the development is going to arrive in that area, it's going to go up and shoot up, inshallah, in prices. If you own it for that intention, that is actually becoming a business asset. It's no longer a personal property. But if you purchase that land because you really wanted to build something on it, and then eventually 2-3 years later, you decided I'm not gonna build anything because it's not worth it. Or maybe you bought it in the first place because you want to build something, but then a few years later you realize the prices are going up, mashallah. You know what? Let me actually sell it, and probably I can benefit by buying somewhere else. In this case, if I sell it, do I pay zakah on it? The answer is no, because you did not have it there as a commodity. You only sold it because the prices went up and you wanted to benefit from it, so you sold it in the same year. So how am I going to pay zakah on this? the same money that you collected from the price and from that land is going to go into your cash flow. And as a result, towards the end of the year, that will also come as part of your money that you need to pay zakah off anyway. Unless that money went to your bank account, and before the end of the hawl or the year, you used it to buy another property. In this case, khalas, you sold one land, you purchased another one, and that's it, we're done. Okay, what if I own multiple houses? I own multiple houses. One house where I live, alhamdulillah, in, and 2, 3 other houses, I'm keeping it out for rent, for business. What do I do in this case? Do I pay zakah on these other houses? The answer is no. You don't pay zakah on these houses because these are for rent. So what do? The zakah comes out from the rent, because eventually the money that you get from the rent is going to go into your cash. And as a result, towards the end, whatever is left there, you pay zakah off of it. But what if I were, let's say, a real estate agent, but I'm an investor at the same time? So what does that mean? I buy houses and I flip them and then put them back in the market. So I bought 5 houses and then I flipped them in basically and just kind of upgrade them and so on, and I put them back in the market. But the market was slow. So now, since it's slow, they're still there. No one is buying. I'm not renting them either. So just they're waiting there until eventually someone comes and buys it. Maybe a lot of people, they came to see it, but no contract came seriously. If the houses stay on your position and you are unable to sell them or basically get them out of the market and so forth, in this case, if the hawl goes around, then these houses be considered as business assets, or in this case, commodities. So what do? You calculate the value of these houses, and then you take the zakah out of that amount. Let's say each house, for example, will be in the market value 200,000. 200,000 times 5, that's $1 million. So you pay zakah off of 1 million. You say, but I don't have the cash with me right now. What's the zakah for 1 million, ya Jama'ah? 25,000, right? So if you don't have the 25,000 cash right now, you still owe it as a zakah, which means the moment you sell the first house, you immediately take the 25,000 out of it as zakah. Unless more months came by, so what might be in proportion will be actually calculated as well with that. But the point is, anything that you personally own, you don't pay zakah on this. Once it becomes a commodity of its own merit, then it gets into the business, and therefore will be calculated as zakah as long as 1 full year goes by and passes by. Taib. Yes. Exactly. If you have these 5 houses, but I put them out in the market not for sale, I put them down there actually for rent. But the market was also slow. First month comes in, second month comes in. No one is renting really. In this case, what do? I'm still supposed to get zakah. I'm supposed to get actually income out of it, but I'm not getting anything. In this case, there is no zakah on them because you're not putting it there for sale. But once you start putting them for sale, that's when you start calculating actually the amount for that. And what about my personal house? It's my personal house. So I moved out of that house to a different state, for example. I'm putting my house for sale. The market is slow and is not going anywhere. But I've already moved away. In this case, if I sell this, if 1 full year goes around and the house wasn't sold at all, do I pay zakah? Actually, now you pay zakah on it, because it is actually considered now a commodity for sale. And it was there for 1 full year, which means it was cash, but it was frozen in this asset. That's what it means. It's part of your wealth that was frozen in this asset. So that's something you need to keep in mind. If you're not putting it there as a commodity, you don't pay zakah on it. Number 2, jewelry. The question you asked. So I have jewelry. Alhamdulillah, I have, let's say, $10,000 worth of gold or silver. So what do I do in this case? The ulama actually they differed on jewelry if it's considered a payable amount or not. However, they all agree. Those who differed on the subject, they all agree. If people use jewelry as a treasure, if they use it as a treasure, which means they buy gold or silver and they store them in banks, for example, or in a safe or something like that, not for personal use, that jewelry will be considered as treasure and will pay zakah off of it. So there's a zakah, basically payable amount. But when we say jewelry, we're talking about what, ya jama'ah? Gold and silver. What about platinum? Not zakah payable. What about diamond? Ya jama'ah, diamond. Which is more valuable, the diamond or the gold? Diamond. But unfortunately, of course, the value of diamond, it's an attributed value. It's not real value. Someone just fooled us that it's worth that much, so we just borrowed to it, unfortunately. But gold and silver is different. So therefore, even if diamond is actually higher in terms of value, but there is no zakah on diamond. However, if you have zakah, if you have diamond and you're basically you're a business person, or even you have a jewelry store, then you pay zakah because it becomes a business commodity right now. It's not like it's a personal ownership. So those ulama, again, they say that if you buy the gold or silver and you store it as a safety net, a social security for the future, whatever reason that people have in their mind, then you pay zakah on that amount. So you have $10,000 worth of gold, and it's sitting there in the bank, in the safe, for example. You're not even using it for anything. And some people, they buy it in coins. So it's not even actually, it's not jewelry to wear anyway. So in this case, if you don't use it, it becomes a treasure, so you pay zakah, and it's the same amount, 2.5%. Do I pay gold or silver? You can do that if you want to, or you can just give the amount of cash equivalent to that amount of zakah. Okay, what about the jewelry that I use? The jewelry that I usually use, which means when I bought it, I didn't buy, or maybe I got it for my wedding, for example. And in some cultures, you get something for your wedding day, and you don't see it at all until your son gets married. So what do you do with this jewelry? That's supposed to be yours, yani. It's not yours, unfortunately. So therefore, that amount actually is considered really treasure, because it was never used. It was just, kind of like one day, and then that's it, we're done. That is treasure right now. You pay zakah off of that amount. Similar, but if the jewelry is being regularly used, when we say regularly, we don't mean every day. No, we mean basically you use it when there is an occasion. Ramadan comes, Eid, there is dinner, for example, people wear jewelry, for instance. There's a party of some sort, they go and they put that jewelry on, so on. People are visiting over, they do the same thing too. They travel overseas, they take it with them for some other parties and weddings and so on. So if they use it, the ulama, they have difference of opinion on the subject. Some ulama, they say actually you still pay zakah. And wallahu alam, the right opinion on that I believe actually is that if the jewelry is being used for as a personal property, you do not pay zakah on that jewelry. But if you're not using it and you're storing it again as a safety net, then in this case you still need to pay zakah. So some sisters, they say, well, Sheikh, honestly, since we moved here in this country, I've never had any occasion to use that jewelry. Like, you know what? I've never had in my intention to store it as a business or as a safety net. No, but it just happened to be. And then here in Irving, for example, police will tell you that don't leave any such valuables in your house unless you have it in an asset, or move it maybe into a bank. So therefore, we got that advice, so we just put it into a bank. And it has been a while. It has been a while since I used that, for example. Now, Allahu A'lam with the intentions, of course. We leave people to their intentions. But if the intention was never really to store it for that purpose, for that reason, then it's still considered personal property. But if they have started using it, I mean, that's why we always recommend for people every now and then, if you would like to just break that, actually, that item from being a treasure, by getting it out and use it for whatever occasion that you can, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Some ulama made some distinction, which is there is no evidence for it really to suggest that. They say it depends on how often they use it. Like, do you use it most of the year or less and so on? It depends. But there is really no distinction on how much time or how many times you should use it before it can be counted as treasure that becomes tax payable. Wallahu alam. Number 3, personal debt. What's mean by personal debt right now? Alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with so much wealth. Some brothers, they come to me and they say, hey, can I borrow 1,000 from you? Can I borrow 5,000 from you? Can I have 10,000, inshallah, I'll bring it back to the end of the year, or maybe this month or that month and so on. So I give people money, I give it out, as charity, basically loans, which means there's no riba over here, alhamdulillah, rabbil alamin. What do I do with this debt? Do I calculate that as part of my wealth? Am I responsible to pay zakah on it while it's still in their hands? Should they pay zakah themselves on the money that they have in their hands, even though it's mine, what do we do with this money? Wallahu alam, the right issue or the right opinion on this mas'ala is that this money is yours. Whether it's in your hand or theirs, it's still considered your money. And as long as it's still in their hand and it's accessible, which means it's not like a dead end, would never come back again, then you need to pay zakah on it. Let's say the amount of money that you have given them is $10,000. So it's already a zakah payable amount. And you need to pay 2.5% of this. Whether you pay the zakah in advance by calculating that amount of money with the cash money you have at the moment, and then you pay zakah in advance. And then when the money comes, alhamdulillah, it's zakah free because you already paid zakah on it. Or if you think that this amount is going to be coming in 2-3 years, you might wait until you collect the money and you pay the zakah backward. So you pay the zakah on this amount basically backward for the past 2-3 years. The easiest way is that you pay zakah every year regardless whether you have it or not. So if it's in the hand of the people, you still calculate this amount as part of your money and you pay zakah on the total sum of this amount altogether. Okay. What if some of that debt is not coming anytime soon? You know, sometimes you give people money and they just it just poof, disappears. Yani they say, inshallah, give it to you next month, inshallah. Next month comes and the month after that and the month after that. And just just what happened? Is it coming or not? Is it coming or not? Now, here's the thing. First of all, before you start expecting them to pay that amount, ask yourself the question. When they told you, I'll bring it to you next month, did you answer them by saying, it's okay, inshallah ta'ala? Because if you say it's okay, maybe you gave them the wrong message, which means what? Keep it, I don't need it, alhamdulillah, it's okay. Ask yourself the question because you might be thinking, where's my money? Why is he not giving me the money? And you feel shy, embarrassed, you're just too maybe you don't want to lose a friendship because of that $1,000 and so on. You know what? It's still your money, that's your haqq. But still ask yourself the question, why isn't he or she is paying the money back? Maybe because I gave him the wrong impression, I don't need the money. So to make sure that there was no mistake, misunderstanding of what this money means, okay? That's the first thing. Second thing, if you know, if there is a due date, then like we said earlier, you need to calculate the zakah and you pay it. If you know that this person has already consumed that money in business, in whatever expenses that they had and so on, and there is no time that you would expect this money to come back again. I mean, the individual still acknowledge the debt. That's one way. Or the person tells you, hey, I owe you nothing. That's it, I owe nothing. Jazakallah khair, thank you for your help. So they say, I can't give you anything. Whether they acknowledge the amount, but they have no way of paying back to you, or they completely deny that you owe them anything, or they owe you anything actually. Either way, this is in the Arabic language called daynun ma'doom, like an inexistent loan or debt in this case. So basically that amount, eventually the ulama, they have difference of opinion on how to calculate zakah on this. Wallahu alam, the right opinion is that you don't calculate this as part of your zakah until you collect that money. Again, until you collect that money. So someone owes you $10,000. And then you realize when the time was due for the zakat, for the money to be paid back, you went to this person, I didn't hear from you. Well, honestly, I'm still, not doing well. I promise you, inshallah, I'll bring it to you in 6 months, binillah azza wa jal. 6 months come by. I'm so sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I'm broke right now. Unfortunately, I filed for bankruptcy, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully, inshallah, next year. And the next year becomes the next year. And the next year becomes the next year. So 4 or 5 years pass by, you're not getting your $10,000 back. Do I have to pay zakah on this? You don't have to pay zakah on this. You wait until you collect the money. Okay, when you collect the money, how much zakah do I need to pay? Some of the ulama, they say you only pay, you calculate all the year, the past years, but wallahu alam, the right opinion on this mas'ala is you only calculate for that year. That's it. You calculate for that year only. Otherwise, if you're going to calculate for 10, 15 years, for example, of a money that you once thought you had it, and then you're going to have to take the zakah off all of that amount, it will be consumed for nothing. So therefore, basically, you pay only for that particular year, and that would be it. So this is basically the zakah on personal debts and what personal loans that you give people. Number 4, stocks. That's a very actually kind of complex issue, and I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. When it comes to stocks, we have two kinds of these things. The daily actually trade, and you have the long-term business, like 401k, for instance. The daily trade is when people, every day they go online, for example, and they check the prices. They buy at the beginning of the day, and they sell at the end of the day. They check the market. They see how it's going. Those people who buy and sell on daily basis, we assume that you're dealing with the halal business, halal market. But those who are doing basically daily trades, the stocks right now are considered commodities. It's just like you have a commodity in a store. And as a result, the ulama, they say the way this person would calculate their zakah is by the end of the year, they need to check how many stocks they have and the value of these stocks, and they pay 2.5%, just like when you do with business commodities. Just like if you have a grocery store, for example, or department store. You look at the inventory and you calculate how much that costs, actually how much is the value of this commodity or this inventory, and you pay the 2.5%. Similarly, the daily trade, the person who owns at the end of the year, how much they still have in their hands, that is like an inventory. They pay 2.5% of all of that. But when you deal with the long-term investment right now is different. The 401k, for example. So people now, they don't pull the money every day. They don't pull the money every year. They're going to pull the money at the time of retirement, for instance. So ulama now, they have a lot of actually difference of opinion on the subject of 401k. Is that considered an actual money which you have full possession over or not? Do we have the full possession of the 401k or not? Some, they say you don't because you can't take it out. But others say, no, you can, but you're going to be taxed heavily, and you're going to lose penalties and so on and so. So even though you might think that you have $300,000 there on your 401k package, but if you pull it out with the tax and the penalty, you're going to probably lose a lot. So in this case, how much zakah do I pay? Do I pay zakah on the 300,000? Or whatever is left if I pull it out every single year? It becomes a complex issue to calculate that every single year differently. So some of the ulama, they say you calculate zakah like you do with the first category of stocks. And others, wallah, they say actually depends on the kind of business and portfolio that you have. Therefore, there is really no easy answer to 401k, like there's no one answer to everybody. It is case-by-case scenario. Depends on your investment, depends on the kind of companies you're dealing with, and depends on the terms of your 401k, all these things. However, it is not treated like inventory. Instead, they say, and wallah alam, I believe actually, like one of the mashaykh mentioned to us, is that the 401k, you don't pay zakah until you pull the money out. So once you pull the money out, it's just like the debt we talked about. Once you pull the money out, then you pay zakah on that particular amount that you've taken out. Let's say if you had 300,000, but you had to pull it early, for example, you go penalized, you take heavy taxes, you end up, for example, with 200,000, for instance. So I don't pay zakah on 300,000. I pay zakah on 200,000. I want the cash money that I have in my hand, and I pay 2.5%. In this case, you pay $5,000, and that's it. You're done. Other ulama have difference of opinion, but that's what I believe, Wallahu alam, the 401k, is that you wait until you collect that money, and then you pay zakah, inshallah ta'ala, on the money that you have collected. Again, there is difference of opinion over the mas'ala. Business assets. Business assets, when you talk about business, let's assume, take an example of service business, for example, car rentals. In this case, how do you pay your zakah on car rental? Do you consider the cars as inventory? It's part of the assets or not? The answer is yes. But what about computers, desks, furniture, whatever that stuff? Do we consider these items as tax payable items or not? The answer is actually no, they're not. Why? Because part of the condition of the zakah money or the personal wealth that requires from you to pay zakah off is to have to be growing or have the potential to produce growth. So the car rental, the cars themselves, they produce growth because they bring you the money in, right? But the furniture is in there and the desks that are in there, they don't have anything to do with that. So therefore, Even though you say, well, they present the business, the marketing, and this and that, that has nothing to do with that. So you don't pay zakah on these items. You only pay zakah on the inventory that you have. Grocery store. Now, everything on the shelves and also in the, in the back, let's say, warehouse and so forth, all of that is considered inventory. That is potentially, of course, providing growth. Therefore, you calculate all of that, and you pay 2.5%. So once again, what if someone has a factory? What about the machines, the production line, all that stuff? Production line, machines, and so on, basically, you don't pay zakah on them. And instead, you pay zakah on, obviously, the contracts that you sell and the product that you sell out and the cash that brings in and so forth. And if you have any material that is the potential, of course, producing growth, becomes inventory that will be calculated towards paying the zakah money and so on. And I think it's going to be a case-by-case scenario. Depends on what kind of business that you have and how you deal with it and what kind of inventory you have and so on. The question, the $7 million question, the Bitcoin. Is that a tax payable amount or not, Jama'ah? For those who don't know what Bitcoin is basically more of like saying it's electronic amount of money. Electronic money that's been traded by people. It was produced electronically. Like there is absolutely no foundation to whatsoever. However, it reached amount where it's now becoming valuable enough for people to use to buy actual products, exchange for product as well. So it has its own value. Do we consider Bitcoin a legitimate currency, like saying US dollar or Canadian dollar, for example, or Saudi Riyal or something like this? Do we consider this as an actual currency right now? The answer to this is yes. Because when it comes to money in Islam, it has no specific shape or form. Gold and silver were only considered the most valuable items because they've been used for generations as the price of commodities. And then when people stop using gold and silver for the dollar bill, for example, and the currency that we have today in our hands, people start using this as the commodity at the price of commodities. So it becomes now the mal, or meaning the price of commodities. Bitcoin is the same thing too. Maybe at the beginning it wasn't perceived that way, but now it reached that level where people now are using it actually to exchange goods and became more of like the price of commodity. It would be considered as another form of currency. You might say, but who owns it anyway? Like there's no specific sovereignty or a country that will claim a sovereignty of the Bitcoin in that sense. It's not like saying US dollar, Canadian dollar, for example, or European euro, but Bitcoin, who is the real owner of Bitcoin and so on. So therefore, the ulama actually, again, they ruled it doesn't matter who owns it, even though some people, they say it has to be under a sovereign entity, such as a country or a government, but that's actually is not the most popular opinion. It is considered money, so how do I pay zakah on Bitcoin then? Whatever value of Bitcoin you have, based on the currency of your country, how much the value of that, and you calculate exactly the same thing too. The exact same amount, the same thing, because now it has the value of cash and money. I know it's not doing much these days. The situation economically is not as used to be before, but at least these are some of the ideas, actually the ways how people used to calculate their wealth and their money and so on. Shall we talk about livestock, or do we want to stop over here and ask about money, ya Jama'ah? Let's stop here, inshallah, and see if you guys have any question on the subject of personal wealth. Any question on personal wealth? Munir, go ahead. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's say you put an investment in software, and it's still not producing anything until now. Okay, so what you're doing right now is more of like a mudaraba, which means you put some money in there, and it's still in the making, right? So the money went into paying salaries and development and all the stuff and so forth. So still there is no real asset in your hand to calculate, right? Because it's almost gone. It's gone into the production, basically, right? That's what we're saying. So is that production has any specific value or not yet? Not yet. So you see, this is the thing. If there's a value to it, you need to calculate how much value is there. And based on that becomes actually like the commodity that you're working on. As if you're having a factory producing cars, for example. So in this case, this is the amount, this is the value of it, if it has still any value. So if the value is still not 100,000, went below, that is the amount you calculate towards your zakah. Then in this case, whatever cash is left in that company, let's say you have, let's say, multiple partners, you pulled 500,000, and then you start investing in producing that software. From that 500,000, what is left is 50,000 in cash. The 450 already actually went into the production. So there is no really tangible kind of asset to look at. It's still in production. It's electronic right now. In this case, you worry about the 50,000. You calculate that towards your zakah. Wallahu alam. Now, yes. You take all the debts out. Let's say you purchase these houses, these cars, car business. You purchase these cars, and you still owe the bank a lot, right? So in this case, you see how much you owe the bank. Remember, if you want to pay the bank the debts off right away, then in this case, you take all that amount out of whatever money that you have in your hand. But if you don't plan to do that, then you only just give that monthly payment. Whatever cash money that you have in your hand, you eventually calculate the zakah from that. Well, you eventually, in this case, because it's shared actually entity right now between you and the bank, so eventually you're going to take the entire amount of the inventory from that debt. And whatever left cash in your hand, that's the amount you pay zakah off. Now, yes. So you purchase 2-3 lands in another country, for example, with the intention of should we build on it or maybe keep it for some time? There's no real vision for it yet. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so if there's no vision, we assume to be personal until assumed otherwise. If there's no vision for it, like you bought it basically because it was near this neighborhood. Inshallah, one day we might build a house on it. But then 2-3 years later, the area changed, the zoning changed, and suddenly it becomes more industrial. So you know what? I'm not gonna build a house right now. So let us just sell it, for example. It stays on the market for 2-3 years. You pay zakah on these 3 years. Wallahu a'lam. Naam. Yes. Naam. I'm aware of that hadith, and there are other hadith counters that actually, but eventually it's a matter of whether authenticity or interpretation of it. Wallahu alam, it's still, I would say, the personal jewelry, you don't pay zakah on it. No. No. So a question, if I have multiple personal properties and I put them separately, they don't have a nisab on their own. But if you pull them all together, they give nisab amount, for example. Again, when we talk about personal wealth, that is zakah payable. So for example, you have cash, $2,000 cash, for example. And then you have $1,000 gold that you save on the side. Now that's 3,000, right? And then let's say you have a store, for example, business that you have. And when you check the inventory and everything and so forth, let's say you do business, Amazon business, for example. And your garage, you have some items that you put for sale. And after the year just came by, you calculate everything, it's about 5,000 of its value. So now you say 5,000, 2,000, 1,000, all of this 8,000, collect them together, you put the sum total all together, and you pay zakah on this. Obviously, after you take the debts out. Now, if you put them all together, there is still less than nisab, then there is no zakah. So let's say you have again $1,000 cash, $1,000 gold, and maybe $500, let's say, goods in the garage that you sell on Amazon. This is 2,500. Still, you don't pay zakah. No. Mm, mm, mm. No, if you plan to pay the debt off, then you take it out. Let's say throughout the year you didn't have much money, but towards the end of the year, suddenly you got $10,000. And now zakah is due in 2 weeks. But I know I need to pay the student loan, for example, next month. In this case, you deduct the student loan out of the zakah amount money. If you have a lot of money throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, right before the zakat due date, for example, you put all of this in business, or maybe it was lost for whatever reason, and then you go, you look, you have less than the nisab amount. You don't pay zakah anymore, even though you had all this amount throughout the whole year. Just like we said, you have nothing throughout the year. Towards the end of the month, you have a lot of money. You pay zakah on this. So that's the fair trade, yani. Wallahu alam. Now, yes. Like what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So you still expect money to come, right? Okay, if you expect money to come, let's say you start business, and now they're supposed to pay you, let's say, an invoice. That invoice, let's say, is $10,000. But they haven't paid that $10,000 yet. And the zakah is due right now, so they owe you 10,000. Do you pay zakah on that 10,000? The answer is no. Once you collect the 10,000, you start calculate this to the zakah year of that year. So if you collected it after the zakah due date came in, then you calculate that to the next year. Wallahu alam. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. So the pension, for example, the 401k right now, I reached that retirement, let's say, year or day. And now I have the option of pulling the entire full amount, or I can just take, monthly payments. So if I take monthly payments right now, do I pay zakah on that amount? Well, there is no zakah, monthly zakah. Zakah has to be annual, so you don't pay on monthly payments. Instead, in this case, since you have access to the zakah, that money is actually on your full possession. But you chose not to pull it out. So therefore, you pay annual zakah on the entire amount of your 401k. Wallahu alam. Naam. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. We don't calculate for the inventory in the business, for example. You don't count which one stayed for a year in your possession. No, it's basically at the end of the year, whatever is left in your inventory, doesn't matter how long you had it in your possession. You had it for a month, for 2 months, for 6 months, whatever. But anything stays in the inventory, you calculate that as part of your wealth. Why? Because again, it has cash value. So, but it's frozen in that asset. So therefore, you're going to have to calculate all of that, regardless how long it has stayed on the shelves or even in the storage or the warehouse. Wallahu alam. Khair inshallah ta'ala. Well, next week, bidnillah, when we come back, we're probably going to continue another session on zakah, or we might move inshallah to fasting, bidnillah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.